This is the Plagmanrules Podcast. All right, everybody, welcome. It's Monday, October 9th, and we've actually got quite a loaded schedule for you today. We've got a look at the weekend box office, again by the initial estimates here. We've also got a few things to talk about with the new Justice League trailer that just dropped on Sunday. We've also got a couple of new announcements for the Fast and the Furious franchise. We got into a little bit of it last time, but now some more details are available, so we'll kind of go back into that topic again. And then I do want to quickly talk about what happened on Friday with all of the unveiling, coming forward, I guess, against a lot of Hollywood and movie pundit icons, so to speak, who really can't be looked at the same way again now after the news that we got about them. So I might talk about that just a little bit here. But let's start with the weekend box office here. Okay, so in first place, no surprise, it's Blade Runner 2049. The big surprise, though, is the total 31.5 million opening weekend. Now, a lot of people, I think, were expecting like 65 million for this, and they were really jumping the gun there. I was like, hold your horses here, people. We have to remember the original Blade Runner from 1982, when it first came out, was not really well received. Siskel and Ebert both gave it thumbs down, as I recall. It was not a box office hit, it was not a critical hit, and it was kind of a thing to where Ridley Scott revisited it and he kept, updating it and so on and so forth. And then it was, roughly 10 or 15 years later before it finally got the notoriety that it's now become, a sci-fi classic. So it's kind of a thing to where, yeah, there are fans of the original Blade Runner, but they have not been around for as long as people might think just on the outset of it being released in 1982. Then the movie was 2 hours and 43 minutes long, or, roughly 2:45. That's a long time to sit in the movie theater, and I think the word got out about it too soon, and there were articles written about it like 3 months ago that the movie was going to be more than 2 hours and 40 minutes in runtime. And then on top of that, when you count a movie that is that long, that means the number of screenings you can have are not going to be as high, because you've got The Mountain Between Us, the My Little Pony movie also opening this weekend. It is still in strong competition here. Kingsman, American Made, Lego Ninjago movie, Flatliners, a lot of these recent movies that are still going to have showings. It's not like Blade Runner comes out in the same time that it came out, because it, remember, was really the first one that kicked off the fall movie season, and it came at a time when Hitman's Bodyguard had been number one for 3 weeks. It was like, well, a lot of people who wanted to see the movie have seen it now, so that meant that they could flush out all those other kind of late summer releases that were still doing, like a couple bucks a day in the theater, and they could flush them out and put it on so many screens. It didn't matter that the movie was 2 hours and 15 minutes. The competition around it accounted for more and more screenings to take place every day in all the theaters. So that since Blade Runner is opening here on the first weekend of October, when we've got all these other movies in competition, that makes it hard for a 2 hour and 45-minute movie to have, a huge dominance in the number of screens. That definitely hurt. And I'm just thinking now, maybe just the popularity and the expectations to where this movie was, at least for tracking and stuff, I guess people just weren't all that excited about revisiting it. And I mean, overall, aside from Star Wars, I can't really think of any other recent examples of revisiting franchises, 10, 15, 20 years plus later, and in this case it was 35 years later. We haven't really seen a lot of those late sequels that really take off at the box office, especially when we get to like comedies like Zoolander 2, Dumb and Dumber 2, they just didn't take off at the box office. And really, like I said, Star Wars is about the only exception. Now, of course, when it gets into like reboots, those don't count. We're talking like sequels, like full sequels, not reboots. So in that regard, it's just a losing battle when you're opening up this movie here. Despite being one of the most critically lauded films of the year, despite having, like a 95% on Rotten Tomatoes or whatever it was, I think it's dropped now to below 90, but still, a lot of critics went out there and they went big on this movie, giving it, nearly perfect scores and stuff too. And personally, I haven't seen it yet, and I don't think I'm going to see it just because I haven't seen the original Blade Runner, and I'm busy enough as it is. I don't have time to really sit down, watch the original, and then catch this new one. Plus, after an opening like this, it might not be playing in theaters for a long, long time. And we've got, 5 or 6 new releases coming out in a couple weeks, about 2 or 3 new releases next week. So again, a lot of those screenings are going to start dropping again to make room for the new movies. So that one, especially I was counting it at about 48 million, which is right where tracking was having it. In that regard, it's a disappointment, especially to those who were saying 60 million plus. Big disappointment in that regard. But what's going to hurt them most here is the production budget. Now, we don't have the solid numbers on these, but I've heard anywhere between 150 and 175 million dollars just in the production budget cost. Now, when we account marketing into this, and there's a lot of marketing behind this, roughly the number I'm hearing is about 425 to 450 million is the amount the movie has to make before it breaks even. And right now, after its opening weekend and counting in the foreign box office, the film has barely scraped in a little over $80 million. So that's, and most of the time when you release a movie like this to where a lot of your foreign markets have opened at the same time as your domestic market, your opening weekend worldwide total, that's about as high as you're going to get for week-to-week business. It's not like 80 million this week and then 120 million next week. That's not the way these things work. No, you're going to get a lot of money your opening weekend. And again, I just don't think there's a whole lot of foreign markets that haven't played it yet. So really, this is going to be a big money loser for Warner Brothers, and I think Sony is also in this one as well, putting in some money as well. So it's just not what they wanted for sure. Okay, also, yeah, we mentioned it, The Mountain Between Us and My Little Pony also opened this weekend. My biggest shock here of these three, really, is The Mountain Between Us getting 10.1 million. Well, first of all, the trailers didn't catch me. I didn't think it looked that good. The critics are really split on it. It's a little over 50% on Rotten Tomatoes. And I just didn't see a whole lot of marketing for the movie. And, especially when we account a lot of these survivalist movies that come out this time of year. Like a couple years ago, we had Everest come out. And that movie, got a lot of good critical reviews, filmed at a couple of the festivals, which The Mountain Between Us also did. And it got really good reviews off of that. But then when it opened at the box office, nobody was interested. It just didn't make the money. But this one did. In comparison at least, this one made a lot more money. And even I've seen some tracking was up to like 11 million, so it's actually lower than tracking was predicting. But still, I was thinking like 6.5 million. I was not putting a lot of stock into this movie. Maybe the star power is what drove this movie, because Idris Elba and Kate Winslet are the stars here. Now, personally, I don't think every layperson or every, common moviegoer is going to know who Idris Elba is by name. They might recognize his face because he's been in enough movies now. But I think Kate Winslet is still a good star that you can market your movie on. So maybe she's one of the biggest draws here. But I think it's actually a turnaround here for Idris Elba, who, recently he's had some movies come out that just weren't really making it at the box office. I mean, not the numbers that they should have, because he's an excellent performer and an excellent movie star. Outside of like the Thor movies and all those where he's like a supporting character, I'm talking about the ones where he's leading the cast or one of the most important people in the movie. And then My Little Pony, the movie, this one, again, I just didn't see a lot of marketing for this one. Tracking was pointing at about 8 million, and it made 8.8 million in fourth place. And I was, again, kind of surprised. I just didn't think this movie was going to hit, even though it does have a lot of big stars in the voice cast. I just think the times of My Little Pony kind of being a big pop culture thing have kind of gone, and I was proven wrong here. So 8.8 million, and especially since it was only in a little over 2,500 theaters, which is a lot lower number than I would have thought, it's doing okay, and I think it's going to be, a sizable hit here. And one thing I didn't take into account, though, that might explain this is we do have, like I've mentioned here many times now, the family audiences have really been deprived here recently, but even more so is that target group of the 5 to 10-year-old female audience. They especially, outside of, again, something like Despicable Me 3, they just don't really have a movie that's marketed toward them that's opened up recently. This is one that I think really got their attention, and obviously they and their moms or grandmothers or aunts or even a few guys in there as well. I know they're fans of those, but I'm not one of them. They went out to see it. So, okay, I was wrong about that one. Okay, a couple other highlights here we'll talk about. Victoria and Abdul, this is one, I'm dying to see this one. It went into a moderate release this weekend in 732 theaters. It's been kicking ass here in limited release in its first 2 weeks, and now 4.1 million on 732 screens. That is a really solid performance here, and I think as the movie does expand further, we'll probably see it break 1,000 theaters starting next week. I'm sure the box office numbers for like the weekend numbers are going to go down a little bit. Like it'll maybe only get like 3 million next weekend, but still I think it's going to hold well. We're probably talking a $25 million plus hit here as long as it holds consistently. And one more movie we'll talk about here in its limited release is The Florida Project. Now, this is one when we're talking Oscars in a little bit. We're going to get into the early frontrunner stage here starting in November. I'm betting heavy on this one, The Florida Project. I just think from the trailers, from the word of mouth, everybody who's seen it really loves it. I'm thinking this one will be a big player. And just off of its limited release here in 4 theaters, its opening weekend, $153,000 for a per theater average of $38,000 and a little bit of change there. Really, really solid start. Now, I was kind of immediately comparing it to Moonlight from last year, because that one didn't really pick up a lot of steam until the festival circuit started, and it was from the same distributor, and it kind of came out of nowhere, and it got critically lauded, and everybody loved it. And then when it opened, it made like $100,000 per theater average. So this one didn't quite live up to those expectations at the box office, but I do think it will be a really solid player here in its limited run here throughout the rest of October. Hopefully it'll reach that moderate or wide release by the end of the month or maybe early November, and we'll see it continue there because, again, I'm really dying to see this one. Okay, we'll move on now. Justice League released their supposed final trailer. Well, they've got, a little over a month before release now. And I'll tell you what, the 3 previous trailers for this, all 3 of them I've liked to some degree or another. This is the first Justice League trailer that kind of has me saying, I was underwhelmed. Now, don't get me wrong. I mean, I think there's elements to it that are enjoyable, but right off the bat, we get into one of my pet peeves when it comes to movies, a dream sequence in the opening of your goddamn trailer. Why do it? Now, obviously, I get what they're going for here. They're trying to introduce it, and they're actually showing Superman for the first time in the trailer. But I just despise dream sequences. All they're designed to do is to give the audiences that little jolt, and then they're not there for any other reason. I mean, it's very few times in movies where dream sequences actually work. Like, probably the best example I can think of is Terminator 2. That dream sequence actually has power and moves the plot forward, but most of the time dream sequences are really only there to be a stunt little scene, and they suspend all the tension of the movie because you know it's not going to happen, you know that whatever happens is not going to continue, and that, it's basically a waste of your time. So I'm just not a fan of dream sequences, and so since the trailer starts out with a dream sequence, immediately that kind of set the tone for me. I was like, oh, put a bad taste in my mouth right from the start. And then you even have Bruce, his first line in the trailer is, "I had a dream." So I'm like, oh my god. So we got to continue with that. And plus another thing too, I don't know the name of the song, but the song they played in this trailer just drove me up the walls. It was just a crappy song choice. Just, again, didn't get me excited at all. And then, really from there, I can't really describe the rest of the trailer because all it is just kind of action sequences put together. And I get it, that's how a lot of trailers are sold today, but it's just a lot of CG in there. It's really CG heavy battle scenes, and it's kind of, sometimes it's a little hard to tell what's happening, for me at least. But hey, if you're a Marvel person, you know what? I had the same problem with the end of Avengers 2, so it's not like I'm bashing DC here. So just to make that point clear. The only really good part about this trailer that I really liked was at the end when Flash made that line about the bat signal, and he's like, oh, sorry, because it's actually Bruce outside a costume in front of him. He's like, there's your signal. I mean, oh, sorry. That was kind of funny. And I think I'm looking forward to seeing what Ezra Miller's going to contribute to the group here, but otherwise, this is a really underwhelming trailer right before the movie gets released, or, a month and a half, or whatever it is. It's kind of dampening on my expectations a little bit. And, after Wonder Woman came out and blew us all away in June, I was kind of like, you know what? They were 0 for 3 before Wonder Woman, now they're 1 for 4. I'm kind of convinced that this Justice League movie could work. But now I'm starting to get back to that territory of, these are pretty well-cut trailers, but Warner Brothers always cuts their trailers well, and then it leads to a big disappointment, at least recently. Again, we could be surprised when November comes around and it turns out to be a really spectacular movie, but until then, this trailer kind of set the tone for me for lowering my expectations, and it left a bad taste in my mouth for most of it. So we'll see what happens, but just wanted to share my thoughts there. Okay, so we talked about it last time, but Fast and the Furious, we kind of had a couple of things there. The first thing that we talked about, and really the only thing last time, was that Fast and the Furious 9 got pushed back a year to 2020. Now, since then, we've kind of learned why. There's been all this talk recently about a standalone movie with Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson's character and with Jason Statham's character, and those are Hobbs and Shaw, and that they're going to get their own movie. And that kind of really just sparked up actually just a few months ago. And now they've actually got a release date set for July 26th of 2019. But the new Terminator movie is going to come out on the same day, which, again, that's a sign. Terminator, move your movie now, please. Again, like, move it to October. Move it somewhere later on where it's going to have a good amount of time to itself, where it's not going to be distracted by a lot of other sequels and kind of big hyped movies. And I think it's going to die if it opens here, because not only are you going to open against this Hobbs and Shaw movie, which I'm sure will do really, really well, but it's the week after the live action remake of The Lion King comes out. We talked about this a couple weeks ago, I think. It's just a total suicide here if you're going to launch it here. You're just setting yourself up for failure. Anyway, so this Hobbs and Shaw movie, now like I said, I have not seen any of these movies except for the 5th, 6th, and 7th one. I didn't see the recent one, so I guess none of those characters die from the 8th one because they're coming back. So my big question is, what are they going to do here? Because Shaw was the bad guy in the 7th one, right? And his brother was the bad guy in the 6th one. Why is he teaming up with Dwayne Johnson, especially since they had that big fight in the 7th one? Now, again, I haven't seen the 8th one, so I don't know. Maybe they hash it out or whatever. But that's just kind of confusing to me. Why would you immediately want to team up? But then again, every superhero movie does that, so makes sense. Also, another thing, kind of a key factor here is we've learned that Shane Black potentially might end up as the director of the movie. Now, obviously, this is just by some speculation and some rumors, and it's nothing to really take to the bank here, but I'll tell you what, Shane Black, if you're not familiar, this is the guy who just did The Nice Guys, directed Iron Man 3, and also wrote the original Lethal Weapon movie. And this guy is amazing when it comes to filming, especially writing. The original Lethal Weapon movie, I think, is one of the most underrated action movies of all time. It's terrific, and it really stems from that script and also from Richard Donner's direction. Just a fabulous movie to go back and watch. Now, obviously, since it was made in the 80s for the 80s, it's a pretty, kind of outdated movie by today's standards, and it's pretty light, actually, on big action scenes. It's mainly just a character study of the two characters of Riggs and Murtaugh. But you know what? It works. For what they're doing there, it works. The dialogue is sharp, and especially when you get to the performances, Danny Glover and Mel Gibson, especially Mel Gibson. I mean, he was on fire in that movie, and they just absolutely have the best chemistry. And yeah, it's one, I don't mean to totally go off the tracks here, but it's one, if you have not seen the original Lethal Weapon, or you've only seen it once or something, and you think it's just an 80s kind of memorabilia film, it is. But it's still phenomenal filmmaking. So to get this guy, and especially off of The Nice Guys, which was a very, very great film and was actually on my top 10 list from last year, to get this guy where he's got some of these really fine kind of action ideas and, potentially the idea and the interest and the potential to get some good character moments in there, sign me up. Like I said last time, I'm not a fan of this franchise, not really. This could really, really get somebody like me, get my butt in the seat here for this one, because that would be just a match made in heaven to get Shane Black involved here. So if he gets onto this and he's going to direct it or maybe co-write it or both, even if he just gets involved on a screenplay factor, I think you're going to be better off than just getting random guy, whoever they want to pick to direct the movie. So that is something that really could fuel my interest here. Now, one thing I was going to mention last time, and I was actually going to go into a semi-rant about it, but we had Tyrese Gibson kind of fire off on Instagram last week because, it was right after it was announced that Fast and Furious 9 was going to get pushed back, that he was blaming The Rock for it. But at the time I was thinking, oh, Tyrese, shut up. And I was gonna get on his tail a little bit there. But okay, I see where he was kind of getting a little angry now, because yeah, the Hobbs and Shaw movie, at least by my estimates, will probably only focus on those two characters from the franchise, and everybody else, including Dom and his whole crew, and I don't know the rest of the characters' names, all of them are going to be out for lunch or something. They're not going to be in the movie. So, I get it there to where, hey, this franchise technically is still going, but you're not in it. I get his frustration there, but still at the same time, I don't know why he had to go off and, throw The Rock under the bus there. Okay, the last kind of piece here on Fast and Furious is that Justin Lin, who directed, I believe, the 4th, 5th, and 6th one, and maybe one more. I don't know the full track record here. Maybe the 3rd one too. I can't remember. Somebody who knows the franchise, maybe you can clear this up for me. He directed a lot of these movies, and he potentially could be coming back for the ninth one, because I know it was James Wan who stepped in for the seventh one, and it was F. Gary Gray who just directed The Fate of the Furious. And Justin Lin, in case you didn't catch it, Star Trek Beyond had elements and moments that were the best of any of these rebooted Star Trek franchise movies. And I think his direction actually helped. Obviously the script was good and a lot of that other stuff, but some of the action scenes and little like dogfights and stuff in Star Trek Beyond, well directed. So this is a guy who's kind of come on the radar here and become somebody to watch for. So if he's coming back to the Fast and Furious franchise, I think that's probably a good idea. So, we'll see if maybe he can get into this and get back into the saddle again on Fast and Furious. Okay, we'll close off the show with just a couple of things here. First of all, I wanted to talk about everything that happened over the course of Friday, Saturday, kind of stuff that's happened here with news that's come out of Hollywood of, kind of some big guys in the entertainment industry, behind the scenes, and also some movie pundits and so on and so forth, who had some statements made about them about sexual assault, sexual harassment, and so on and so forth. And for me personally, I, as a guy who is not in a relationship at this time, but would like to be, I'm just a person who looks at the world in this way. Men, what the hell is your problem where you can't respect women? I mean, I just never have understood that sentiment to where the man has to be so dominating. And in this case, especially in the career terms, I don't know why you have to have like ultimatums, but it's like, I just never get any point to that, and I don't feel any sympathy for anybody who thinks in that way. I just never understood that part of the brain that triggers those kind of thoughts. It's absolutely ridiculous. When it comes to these people, when I'm talking these people, I mean these big personalities, or sometimes we do get movie stars who get some very, very controversial moments here and there that really, really taint their image. And sometimes, probably every time, rightfully so. But for me personally, I'm able to distinguish a person, in this case a celebrity, between their work and who they are as a personality. Now, who they are as a personality, I could really care less, because obviously you'll have people that go on talk shows, late night shows, and so on and so forth, and they give impressions of who they are, and maybe, just based on those, we're like, hey, they're probably the nicest guy in the world, aren't they? Well, sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. Now, as far as differentiating what the person does in front of the screen or behind the camera and what they do in their personal life, for me, those are two totally separate issues, and they shouldn't be lumped together. Like, if you look to a classic example like Michael Richards, what was it, like 10 or 11 years ago, everything that happened there at that comedy club where he went into all these racial epithets and stuff and really degraded, a good chunk of his audience for no reason. All that stuff, it doesn't make me look back on the original Seinfeld episodes and say, well, Kramer did this in real life, now all of a sudden I hate the show. No, I'm still able to look back on classic episodes of Seinfeld and say, God, Kramer is hilarious. Now, obviously, that's the first thing that happens there, and of course, as your brain works, you're like, but, and you think of, everything that happened there years later. But still, I'm able to distinguish those two, and I'm not lumping everything together. So I know one of the people that really got all these claims against him was Harvey Weinstein, who, of course, for the world of foreign films doing well at the domestic box office, independent films doing well at the domestic box office, a lot of credit for the kind of reemergence of foreign films doing well in the United States and for independent films doing really, really well in the United States is due to Miramax and everything that Harvey Weinstein and Bob Weinstein did back in the mid and early 90s. Now, obviously, what they do in their personal lives, again, I differentiate that and I put that into a separate kind of container, and what they do behind the camera in this case and really getting things going. Of course, they've established the Weinstein Company since then, which distributes, at times, some of the best films of the year. Like for me, Wind River this year is still one of the best films of the year. But still, again, my main point here is differentiate what they do in their personal lives between what they do for the industry or behind the camera. And for what they do behind the camera, I think that Harvey Weinstein deserves a round of applause. Now, for what he did in his personal life and what he did at the workplace for his associates, and in particular for the women who are working under him, that's deplorable. And he absolutely deserves every bit of ridicule, everything else that's happened to him here over the past few days. He deserves every damn bit of that. And I just don't feel any sympathy for him in his personal life. Now, again, if people start criticizing him in, kind of retroactively and all this stuff for work he's done in the past, that doesn't involve his personal life and stuff, that's when I kind of take a little umbrage there. But otherwise, yeah, as far as a lot of these other, like we had a couple movie pundit personalities who I won't name here because I don't know the full list or the full details. But again, when you differentiate what they do in front of the camera or what they do behind the scenes and what they do for the industry, that's something that's separate. What they do at the workplace, what they do in their personal lives, that's separate as well. So, that's something, just that I do. And I'm obviously saying, you don't have to think that way if you don't want to. Obviously, everybody has their own opinions here. But I just look at it from that perspective, and maybe it's something that everybody else should consider. Now, obviously, if you are a personal victim in that case of sexual harassment or sexual abuse, then yeah, it's, I'm not going to blame you at all, because that's no reason. I feel no sympathy for what those pigs did, for what they did, what they said, what was done. I just never will feel any sympathy toward them. Okay, so that's my little sermon for the day. Sort of sermon, I guess. But anyways, I just wanted to speak to that, to where, yeah, personally, to hear that these people have done these things, I'm appalled that they've done them. And obviously, I don't feel any sympathy toward them for what they've done. But just remember, people, when you're bashing them, some of these people got to where they were for doing good things. And not every last thing they've done is going to be looked at in a negative light. So just as long as we remember that, and again, yes, bash them for what they've done in their personal lives and for the lives they've ruined and the lives they've altered significantly. Obviously, that's something I'm not going to naysay you on. But okay, the last thing I wanted to mention here, just quickly, is tonight we're going to get the second trailer for Star Wars The Last Jedi. And I've been heavily anticipating this trailer. We're, kind of in the respect of things, a little overdue for this trailer. We'll talk about it obviously on Friday. But one thing though, I do have a prediction. We've been hearing a lot recently that what Rian Johnson is doing with this movie and what some of the stars have been saying about this movie is when they read the script, that they read something that surprised them. Something that was like, wow, I did not expect that. Now, in this sequel trilogy so far, we've seen the biggest complaint, and actually I complained about it too, was The Force Awakens, story-wise, really was kind of a best of the original Star Wars trilogy. It wasn't really its own story. Now, obviously, it's new characters and some other new twists and turns here and there. Obviously, those are original and you can't really complain about those being rehashes. But I just get this sense from a lot of the Star Wars fan community and some people that see it just in general, they're going to flip on this. A lot of them right now, they're complaining about it. They're saying, I want original Star Wars content. And I'm actually in there too. I'm kind of more anticipating The Last Jedi than I was The Force Awakens, because I'm thinking it's time to do something a little out of the box in the Star Wars franchise. Now, obviously, Rogue One kind of had its own ideas. I just get this feeling to where people are going to come out of the trailer on Monday, potentially. If not for the trailer, then they will for the movie, depending on what it does. But I think what's going to happen is we're going to hear people complain, well, I wanted original content, but I didn't want that. And there's going to be something in the trailer or an illusion of some kind in the trailer where something off the wall is going to happen, or some idea is going to be brought up, or some plot point discussed or something, that all of a sudden the fans are going to turn and say, well, I didn't want that, and it's really something that really ticks me off about a lot of people that are just dead set fans on these trilogies and on all these different franchises is, okay, if you want original content and you're given original content, celebrate that it's original content. Don't start complaining that it's not your Star Wars or, whatever the hashtag is probably going to be. This is just a prediction I have. I mean, obviously I don't know it's going to happen 100%, but I just have this feeling to where something like this is going to happen, where all of a sudden all these Star Wars fans are complaining that The Last Jedi is going to turn into a rehash of The Empire Strikes Back. Now they're going to come back on us on Monday or Tuesday morning, whatever, and say, oh, they've changed it so much, it's not even Star Wars anymore. And it's like, you were asking for a new original Star Wars like 5 minutes ago. What the hell? So I'm just going to call it ahead of time and say, if that happens, if it does happen, I can say I called it. So just to kind of bring that up. And if it does go for original content, as long as it's not bad original content, I'm actually probably going to be the happier for it. As long as it's a new original idea that's done well and not a straight up rehash, then yeah. And again, not to say Force Awakens was a complete rehash. And for what it was, I liked it a lot. But it's just a thing to where I think it's potentially could go so far outside the box to where Star Wars fans turn and do a 180 on it and say, well, I'd rather have it be a rehash than this. And it's like, well, you were the ones asking for original content, asshole. Anyway, so I just think that's the way things are going to go here in the next 24 to 48 hours. So we'll see what happens there, and I might have some comments like that on Friday, depending on what happens with the trailer. Okay, so yeah, that's obviously probably going to be the biggest talking point there. We'll see what else happens in the world of movie news here over the next few days. And, of course, we've got a few reviews that I have to do. Like I've mentioned in the past couple times, we've got Kingsman, The Golden Circle, Stronger, and American Made. Those reviews are all done, so whenever I get time for them, we'll get to those, maybe on Friday. All right, till then, this has been the Plagmanrules Podcast.